Well, I think we can do without the literary references, but what I will say is that the letter does exist. I can confirm that, and it will be released very soon. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, it's only been about 2 working hours since this matter has been dealt with, so the government is acting very expeditiously.
Sir Christopher Cho.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask my right honourable friend a practical question? We understand that the Prime Minister asked his special advisor, Lord Geit, to give him advice on a particular issue, and that advice has not yet been given. The person who's been asked for that advice has now resigned without even giving any notice or extending his term so that he can answer that question. Who is going to answer that burning question that was put to Lord Geit by the Prime Minister a few days ago?
I'm afraid we will have to wait and see. Can I take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker? I think I may have mischaracterised what the Honourable Member for Argyll and Bute said, and if I did, I would like to apologise if that was not his intention from an earlier question.
David Anna Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wondered what it is about this current Prime Minister that causes him to have such rotten luck in retaining ethics and anti-corruption advisers.
Well, it's very kind of the Honourable Lady to ask that question, because I think this Prime Minister has a lot of good luck. Where he has good luck is when he wins elections. He won an election in London, and he's won an election in this country on a general election, and he'll win more.
Martin Docherty Hughes.
Mr. Speaker, questioned at the Public Administration Committee on Tuesday, the now former ethics adviser described themselves as an asset of the Prime Minister rather than a free orbiting adviser. Now, taking that, doesn't the Minister now agree it's time that not only the ethics adviser's appointment was truly independent of the Prime Minister, but I have to say independent of politics and appointed by the Civil Service Board?
Well, I think all of our independent advisers since 2006 have been independent of politics. So there have been people, as Lord Geit, of the highest integrity and probity. And it is a position which is increasingly, of course, put under considerable pressure. But we have to have regard to that, and we have to ensure that these standards are maintained.
Stephen Timms. Sir Stephen. Neil Hanby.
Speaker, the integrity and ability of Lord Geit is not in question. The question that we're all wondering is, what on earth is it that encouraged him to tender his resignation? What should we expect? What scandal is coming down the tracks?
Well, he may very well be disappointed. Looking for scandal under every stone is something that I think he will find is disappointing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I make a point to the Minister and perhaps to the House that the effective work of an advisor on ethics requires that they are above the day-to-day political feuds and not the focus of them. And over the last few weeks and months, the position of the ethics advisor Prime Minister has been the centre of political feuds between different sides of the House, not confined to that side, not confined to this side. So can I ask my right honourable friend, the Minister, what actions he can take to ensure that the new appointee is protected from being the target of political attacks from whatever side they come?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very good point, and it's one I alluded to before, and that is we must be careful to ensure that future independent arrangements are made where individuals or entities are not put under political pressure to either do something or be accused of being some sort of patsy. The right thing to do is what is important.
Justin Matters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't believe that the Minister's come here without having the letter published. Is the Downing Street photocopier broke, or is this more game playing? I suspect it's the latter. Now, I want to ask him about this commercially sensitive matter that Lord Geit was asked to investigate, which I noticed he didn't deny when responding to the Shadow Minister, but he didn't answer her question as to whether this relates to a direct or indirect financial interest for the Prime Minister or any of his friends, families or business associates. He can answer that question now. He doesn't need to give any details that would be commercially sensitive. He can just confirm who this relates to, because if he doesn't answer that, it doesn't look like carelessness, it looks like a cover-up.
The letter will be published and given to the libraries of the House in due course, very soon.
Mr Speaker, we've got again today, the Minister for Defending the Indefensible sent out to account for the resignation of Lord Geit, who was no longer willing to do the same. My constituents see Westminster ministers who break the rules with no consequence, no sanctions, no ethics. Is it any wonder they now have no faith in this broken Westminster system?
I disagree with the Honourable Lady.
Well done.
John Morrow.
After many years working in both the public and private sector in many countries around the world, I cannot think of a single instance where the behaviour of someone in a leadership position obliged the person responsible for giving ethical or standards advice to resign twice in succession, and yet that person still remained in place. Does he recognise, does he agree that my constituents will conclude that the Prime Minister finds it hard to maintain a working relationship with ethical advice? And how many resignations of ethical advisers will it take before the Prime Minister does resign?
I think, Mr Speaker, I venture to suggest her constituents will find it surprising that Labour focuses constantly in the last 6 months on personalities and not on policies. The reason has to be because when it comes to policy, Labour lose.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm sure that the Minister will agree that principle and standards in public life must be upheld. Can he confirm from the dispatch box that the Government has no plans whatsoever to abolish the role of the independent adviser on ministerial interests?
I can only reiterate what I've said before.
Deirdre Bro.
Just a few of the political casualties of the Prime Minister's premiership so far have been Allegra Stratton, who didn't attend Downing Street parties, Lord Wolfson on the principle the PM shouldn't break the laws he makes, the PM's anti-corruption czar, and now Lord Geit, presumably, and who knows, because we haven't, that send button and hasn't been sent to us on the emails, presumably, though, for being unable to hold the Prime Minister accountable for breaches of the ministerial code. When will someone actually responsible for the degeneration of public standards in government be the one to go, namely the Prime Minister?
Well, Mr Speaker, I think the House will forgive me if I don't take lectures on moral probity from the Scottish nationalists. One only needs to Google the SNP and have a whole list of those incidents.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker. What is it that's so unethical about this law-breaking, rule-breaking Prime Minister? It's about time he resigned.
Well, I realise it's challenging, but if they wish a change of Prime Minister, they ought to try and win a general election. They're not going to be able to do it.
Come on now.
Is there any point in appointing a new ethics advisor for a Prime Minister with no ethics?
Well, of course, the Prime Minister maintains the highest standards in public life and will continue to do so. And despite all of the scurrilous suggestions otherwise, she's given no evidence to indicate in what way she's referring to a lack of ethics.
Jim Shannon.
Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State for Justice in TV this morning indicated that the resignation could be for confidential reasons, or indeed may be for security related and therefore can't be disclosed, or indeed it could be for other reasons. When will the new appointment be made for Lord Geit's successor? How can the House be assured that the person who will be appointed will be a permanent position and will stay the course?
I think the position may become a bit clearer when the letters are published very shortly, but the point that he makes about the future arrangements are ones that are going to be under very careful consideration.
We now come to business questions. We start with Thangnam Debonair.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To ask the Leader of the House if he will give us the forthcoming business.
Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, it will be a pleasure. The business for the week commencing the 20th of June will include Monday the 20th of June, second reading of the High Speed Rail Crewe Manchester Bill. Tuesday the 21st of June, Opposition Day, third allotted day, a debate on the motion, the name of the official opposition, subject to be announced. Wednesday the 22nd of June, consideration of an allocation of time motion, followed by all stages of the Social Security Additional Payments Bill. Thursday, the 23rd of June, will be a general debate on investing in the future of motor neurone disease, followed by a general debate on the National Food Strategy and food security, business to be determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday, the 24th of June, the House will not be sitting. The provisional business for the week commencing the 27th of June will include Monday, the 27th of June, Committee of the Whole House on the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Bill, Day 1. Tuesday, the 28th of June, conclusion of Committee of the Whole House and remaining stages of the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Bill.
Leader of the House, thank them, Deborah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the House for giving us the forthcoming business. But, Mr. Speaker, whether it's failing to deal with the Tory cost of living crisis or just adding to backlog Britain, all we can conclude from the Leader's statement is this is a government with no plan. They continue on with reckless undermining of British institutions and principles that we on this side of the House are proud of. And now the Prime Minister adds to his own labour market shortage after losing his second ethics advisor in just 14 months. There is a reason that even his hand-picked referees can't defend him, because the Prime Minister is indefensible. He should come to this House and he should come clean about the events that led to Lord Geit's resignation. I am glad that Labour's urgent question finally pushed the government into publishing the resignation letter, but why wasn't it published earlier? Why hasn't it been published yet? Will he ask the Prime Minister to come to this House and answer questions after it's published? Does he have any answers to the questions put by my honourable friend in the urgent question just now for Dulwich and West Norwood about concerns that I share about the impact of all this on public faith in our democracy? But meanwhile, Labour, the party of patriotism, stands up for our world-renowned broadcasting industry. On Tuesday, in our successful Opposition Day motion, we called on government to reverse the decision to sell off Channel 4. This provides great entertainment, quality news reporting, good jobs around the country, including in Bristol, and projects British values and creativity overseas. So could the Leader of the House tell us why the government is prioritising selling off Channel 4 over dealing with food, energy and fuel bills? Mr. Speaker, not happy with selling off our country's most treasured institutions, government is also selling out our global reputation. Breaking international law with the Northern Ireland Protocol legislation damages our standing on the world stage. And it doesn't solve the problem. It does look like government is deliberately making things worse to distract from their own civil war. Ministers say that it is normal only to publish a summary of legal advice, but, Mr. Speaker, this does happen to be the only Prime Minister to have broken the law whilst in office, and so I ask the Leader of the House, if the government has nothing to hide, will he undertake to publish the legal advice in full? Now, Mr. Speaker, this morning we heard that more than 150 men who worked at the British Embassy in Kabul are still in Afghanistan. Many have applied to come here but haven't heard back from this government. Many have been tortured, which is shameful. The Home Secretary told us only yesterday that there are supposed to be safe and legal routes here. Well, this needs sorting. Will the Leader get the government onto this today? Last week, Mr. Speaker, a BBC investigation revealed shocking abuse and safeguarding failures in children's homes run by the Colcott Services for Children. And at the same time of these alleged incidents, the company recorded massive profits. Now, we haven't had a response from government, so could the Leader of the House please ask an Education Minister for a statement? Mr. Speaker, the government's failure to tackle backlog Britain is piling on misery to millions. Waiting lists in government departments cripple our economy, cost the taxpayer billions of pounds and prevent people from getting on with their lives. Just look at the Home Office. We have families forced to pay for fast-track passport services, millions wasted on failed outsourced contracts, including, Mr. Speaker, a courier service, we couldn't make this up, that is losing hundreds of passports. This is a Home Office in freefall. Now, Labour called for an apology from the Passports Minister, but he can't even tell us the scale of the backlog. He said work continues to recruit more staff over the summer. Where is the urgency? Given Home Office's well-known top-down culture of fear, I am sceptical that they will even be able to fill the jobs. So could the Leader of the House ask the Home Secretary to make a statement telling us exactly how many outstanding passport applications there are and how she plans to recruit more staff? And it's worth mentioning that Backlog Britain seems to extend to the government's own legislative agenda. The renters' rights reforms announced today are welcome, but they were promised 3 years ago. All we've got is a white paper. When will they bring the legislation forward and give renters the rights they deserve? Mr. Speaker, Downing Street is now Britain's boulevard of broken dreams, a Queen's speech in disarray, failure to tackle the Tory cost of living crisis, writing off billions to fraudsters, selling off British institutions, selling out Britain's reputation, and no grip on Backlog Britain. A party unable to govern ought to make way for one who can. Labour will get the country back on track.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I think we're getting into a regular pattern where the Honourable Lady basically stands up and has a weekly rant. She started with Lord Guy. We've just spent an hour debating that, and the Minister, I think, answered those questions. Those letters will be published very soon, and we await those letters to be published. She went on then to talk about Channel 4 and the sale of Channel 4, and I think then we just had a slight glimpse of Labour Party DNA, where apparently public is good and private is bad, and I think actually that actually doesn't stack up. Channel 4 is a great TV station, and I think releasing it into the private sector and allowing it to flourish and compete with other great private sector programme providers, I think, will allow it to be a world leader and continue to be a world leader, and we look forward to them flourishing within the private sector. Afghanistan, of course, is a very important issue, and the government did manage to get out 15,000 people under very difficult circumstances. I acknowledge that there are people that struggle to get out, and we've continued to help people find safe routes to get to the United Kingdom. It was a huge success to get in there and get thousands of people out in what was the middle of a war zone, and actually those people involved in that process should be commended. She then went on to talk about waiting lists and passports. The statistics are out there. 90% of people get their passport within 6 weeks. We continue to recruit more people. Now, I acknowledge with 91% of people getting their passport within 6 weeks, that does mean that 9% of people are struggling to get their passport. That's why the Home Secretary is bringing more staff on. She's brought 750 on already. There are more coming before the summer, and we acknowledge that we need to get those people their passport so they can enjoy a summer holiday post-COVID as we move forward. And of course, she also made passing reference to the backlogs within the NHS. Now, that's why we introduced the Health and Social Care Levy to help fund the NHS, to give support to get those backlogs down post-pandemic. It's very disappointing the Labour Party decided not to support that investment in the NHS and not to address those challenges, because we can see through it. They just like to complain. They don't actually have a plan. They just want to criticise the government because they haven't got a plan themselves, and they will do anything they can not to talk about their union bosses who are going to call strikes and make people's life a misery. They just want to throw mud and criticise just to hide the fact they don't have a plan themselves for the country and the British people.
Anna Fair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend find time for a debate on support for parents with children who are gravely ill, such as those who are on continuous life support? One of my constituents, Archie Battersby, is only 11, yet he is on life support in hospital following a freak accident at home in April. His family are by his side day and night. Would my right honourable friend agree that maximum professional mental health and emotional support, not just legal, is needed in these extremely sad circumstances?
Well, I thank the honourable friend for a question. Of course, our thoughts are with Archie and his family at this very difficult time. I think in such difficult situations, that does put a huge amount of pressure on friends and family, and they do need help and support with the physically getting to and from hospital, but also their mental health and the impact that has on their family life. That's why we're expanding and transforming mental health services in England through the NHS long-term plan, which will see an additional 2 million people able to access mental health support. But I think the House will want to recognise Archie and his fight.
We come to SNP spokesperson Pete Wishart.
Ever so much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sorry I wasn't in my place last week to enjoy all the fun, but I don't know what those 148 Tory MPs were possibly thinking about. Don't they know that Scotland needs this Prime Minister? We've got a referendum to win, and we need him in place because he is the best recruiting sergeant that we have ever had. So come on, Tory MPs, think about the Scottish national interest and let the big dog roam free, unneutered. So, Mr. Speaker, we need a debate about the opportunities Scotland can secure with being unshackled from this place. Could you imagine any other successful, resource-rich country in the world being asked to forgo all its own internal democracy to be run by this place? This morally bankrupt, failed state? They'd be laughed all the way out of the United Nations. But that's what Scotland has. A Prime Minister who we didn't vote for, doing things that we profoundly disagree with. And, Mr. Speaker, after that urgent question, we need a full debate about who should become the next ethics advisor to the Prime Minister. Now, I know it's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. But think about it. The job security is good. And all you have to do is just to say that the Prime Minister is a very fine chap who always demonstrates the highest possible standards of behaviour. And he doesn't even like partying. That's all the new person has to do. And I'm sure this House could provide a list of candidates to fulfil that role in that post. My starter for 10 would be the Brexit Opportunities Minister, perhaps, or Machiavelli. How about Attila the Hun or Vlad the Impaler? Mr. Speaker, the stench and the moral decay of this failing government now stinks to high heaven, and this House wonders why Scotland wants to get out. The Scottish people are closely observing this place, and when they're given this opportunity to make a decision about the future, they will grab that opportunity with both hands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Honourable Brennan for his question. I think, what this government is doing is getting on with the job, is delivering on behalf of the British people, is concentrating on the huge backlogs that we face following COVID, is dealing with the fight against global inflation. And the Honourable Gentleman, I understand why he wants to just talk about independence and another referendum and maybe another one after that and another one after that, because he doesn't want us to talk about the diabolical record of the SNP government. He doesn't want us to talk about their failing education system and how they're letting young Scottish kids down. He doesn't want to talk about the debacle about their ferries, how their landlocked ferries can't sail on the ocean waves, and that's why he just wants to talk about independence.
Andrew Jones.
Speaker, please can we have a debate on the support given to those homes who have less conventional sources of fuel supplies, but obviously are still facing fuel inflation like everybody else? I'm particularly thinking about those who live in park homes, who may have contracts that detail where they have to buy their LPG, or metering arrangements through park owners. I fully recognise that the general support on fuel prices from the government has been fantastic, but if we have a debate, we can explore how different types of homes are exposed to fuel inflation.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He is an undoubted champion for those people that live in rural areas like Harrogate and Knaresborough, and he will know that the government is absolutely committed to targeting support to those people that need it the most in our fight against global inflation. The issue around households who do not receive electricity through a domestic electricity supply contract, such as residents in park homes, was covered by the government's technical consultation concluded on the 23rd of May, and the government's response to the consultation will be issued later this summer.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The leader will be aware that many of us on all sides of the House have frequently raised the issue of knife crime, the scourge of knife crime, which affects constituencies not just in London but across the country. It certainly affects mine. There is a knife crime event going on. Well, it started a quarter of an hour ago in Committee Room 14, organised by my neighbours, the members for West Ham and East Ham. But in the meantime, could we also get a statement from the Home Office? Because with the longer days, obviously many of us, and this affects all sides of the House, many of us are worried that we're going to see an upturn in knife crime.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He's right, of course, to highlight this, and I would encourage members across the House to attend the event in Committee Room 14, which is taking place. It's something that the government takes very seriously. That's why we committed to another 20,000 police officers. That's why we've already recruited 13,500 more of them. But I think colleagues across the House, in highlighting this challenge, do the right thing, and I think the government will continue to work on it. It's actually Home Office questions next week, and I hope he'll be in his place to raise the matter again with the Home Secretary.
Peter Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 6th anniversary of Joe Cox's death, who I remember as a happy young Labour MP who was clearly going to make a mark on this place, and her dreadful murder, and of course the loss of my dear friend David Amos, I thought it might be helpful to the House if I read an email I got yesterday. Hi, just wanted to say something to you, Peter. You're odious, then the next word begins with F, and the next word begins with C. I hope you get a horrible, painful cancer and suffer in agony. Either that, or somebody kicks, the F word again, out of you in the street. That isn't fair, obviously, to me. It's not fair to my staff who have to read this, and it's not fair to my family members. I raised this today not because it's about me, because I bet virtually everyone in this House has had something like this. And I think on the anniversary of Remember Joe, I wonder if the leader of the House could have a statement or debate, but more importantly, for something to do, something to stop this sick element in society.
Yeah. Can I just say, it is appalling, it is not acceptable. I will be taking up, I was speaking to our head of security immediately after I finished in the chair. But I just want to remind members, if you get emails, threats, any intimidation, please let us know. If it's direct, go to the police and the constituency, but certainly speak to people here. It is not acceptable, it's not tolerable. We will not put up with it. We will follow up on what's been mentioned. Sorry, Leader, but I do think it's important.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I take this opportunity to pay tribute to you and all the work that you've done in this area? I know that the House certainly is grateful for your efforts. I echo your comments. I think it's a poignant moment to reflect on colleagues that we have lost and recognise how serious this is. Sometimes it's easy to dismiss such emails as just an email, but actually sometimes it does turn into physical violence, and that must be avoided.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was recently brought to my attention by members of the Acorn Union and tenants in York House, in my constituency, that properties in the building are fitted with asbestos floor tiles, and that in communities the social landlord responsible for the building have failed to make residents aware. This has understandably caused great concern to the residents of York House, particularly where the asbestos floor tiles are damaged, and has left them deeply concerned for their health. So can the Leader of the House arrange an urgent debate on social landlords and their absolute responsibility to keep their properties and those living in them safe, especially where asbestos is present?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I'm sorry to hear about the plight of residents, and I'm glad the Acorn Union is drawing it to his attention, and I'm sure that he will take action to make sure that's put right. It's something that the government also takes very seriously. That's why we're introducing the Social Housing Regulation Bill. That's why this morning there's a white paper out which is going to take action to make sure we get good landlords and good tenants, and I think we can make some progress in this area, and I look forward to him supporting the progress of that legislation.
Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the comments earlier on Afghanistan. For about 6 months now, I and my office have been trying to assist a constituent of mine whose former colleague is in hiding. He was very publicly exposed, involved in counter-narcotics and counter-terrorism, and served the UK government in Afghanistan for over 10 years. So can he use his good offices to speed up the process at the Home Office and the MOD? And could we possibly even have a debate in this House to discuss how we can improve the situation for those people out there who served with great courage our country and our allies over the years that we were in Afghanistan?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and of course he's right to highlight this case. I think a debate would be something which is worthy of consideration. I know that the government has a proud record of supporting people and getting them back into safety and getting them to the UK. If the honourable member wants to write to me with the specific details of the case, I will make sure I raise it with the Home Secretary directly.
Speaker, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine has just published a report, Tip of the Iceberg, indicating that waiting times in A&E and access to emergency care are a lot worse than officially reported. This is down to a reporting mechanism that only counts the time from DTA, or decision to admit, made by a responsible clinician, often hours after a patient first arrives in A&E. The college found that in 2021, on average, over 1,000 patients waited in A&E for 12 hours or more from a time of arrival every single day. Can we have a debate in government time on this hugely concerning and important issue?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for the question. Of course, I would welcome a debate. That's why the government introduced the Health and Social Care Levy, to give the investment into the NHS to cope with the COVID backlogs that we see. That's why we're doing NHS reform, and I can't understand why the Honourable Lady didn't support that investment into the NHS that we're now seeing in supporting the Health and Social Care Levy. And I only hope she'll have another opportunity to put the record right and support the Health Secretary as he brings forward reforms within the NHS to make it more efficient.
Butler. Mr. Speaker, the BBC has announced that it plans to end the local TV news bulletins produced in Oxford that serve my constituency of Aylesbury. Instead, we will receive a bulletin from Southampton. Now, Mr. Speaker, stories about sailing and the coast are not terribly relevant to one of the most inland towns in England. I'm extremely concerned that this move is in contravention of the BBC Charter, which says all audiences should be able to engage fully with major local issues. So I wonder if my right honourable friend, the Leader of the House, could tell me how best this can be addressed by this House.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. I'm sure he will understand that the BBC is operationally and editorially independent from the government, and it is a decision for the BBC. We do recognise the BBC is having to make difficult financial decisions. However, under the licence fee settlement, the BBC will continue to receive around £3.7 billion of public money. So I'm sure my honourable friend is aware the DCMS Select Committee is currently conducting an inquiry into the sustainability of local government, and local journalism plays a vital role in scrutinising local authorities, and it's something which I personally value. And BBC East Midlands Today is a great resource, but I look forward to seeing what the committee reports in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of immunocompromised people are still shielding because they know the vaccine doesn't really work for them. However, there is hope with Evershield. So can the Leader of the House help to press to ensure that we get a timeline published for when this life-changing drug will be available?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for a question, and I pay tribute to her. I know she's a doughty campaigner on this issue and has done a lot of work in this area. It was health questions this week. I don't know if she had a chance to raise it at health questions, but I will raise it with the Health Secretary on her behalf and try and assist her in the work that she's trying to deliver.
Hendry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many businesses in my constituency of Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey have been in touch with me because they're experiencing severe difficulties in recruiting staff, especially seasonal workers in the tourism and transport industry. They make up a large part of the sector's workforce, and UK restrictions are depriving us of their contribution to our communities. This government's hostile environment, coupled with being ripped out of the EU and the single market and the freedom movement against Scotland's will, has left too big a gap. Can we have a debate in government time on the urgent need for Scotland to have the power to address this issue?
Well, the honourable gentleman will be aware that it's Home Office questions next week, so he'll have a chance to raise it with the Home Secretary directly. But I think he would recognise that there is pressure within employment markets because the economy is so strong, because the government has put measures in place to allow us to come out of COVID quicker than other economies around the world. That has brought huge pressures within the employment market. I think that's an opportunity for people to improve their life chances by seeking other careers and jobs, and there is support mechanisms for getting people back into work and off unemployment benefit into employment, and I hope those businesses will take the opportunity to look at those schemes.
Sir Roberts.
To mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, school children across the UK were given Jubilee books, and schools would automatically receive the books to coincide with the celebrations. But in Wales, where education is run by the Welsh Labour government, this automatic system was rejected in favour of each school opting in. But this opt-in system meant that the school children would not receive the books till September. Now, in my constituency of Wrexham, that means children haven't received the books, but next door, neighbouring England, they have. So can my right honourable friend confirm that the Department of Education was explicit in telling the Welsh Labour government about the delivery date of the books?
Well, I thank the honourable friend for a question. I think she's right that the Department for Education was explicit with the Welsh Government. It is very disappointing. I think we had a fantastic Jubilee weekend where the whole country celebrated the achievement of Her Majesty in achieving 70 years. And it's really disappointing for those school children that they won't get their books on time and you know, as part of the Jubilee weekend celebrations, be able to look back and read those books now.
Ellie Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A year on from the government's rape review, where they admitted they'd failed victims, the Justice Secretary has announced today that a new pilot will be rolled out in just 3 out of 77 Crown courts, and not even until October. When rape prosecutions have reached record lows and court backlogs have reached record highs, this simply isn't good enough. So can we have a statement from the Justice Secretary so members have an opportunity to question him on why the Conservatives continue to let rapists off and let survivors down?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for a question. I don't accept the premise of her question. It's something that the Home Secretary has made violence against women and girls a national policing priority. It is Home Office questions next week, and it's also Justice questions, I think, in early July. But we've launched the Safer Streets and Safer for Women at Night Fund. We're providing £25 million for Safer Streets projects. We've established a new lead for violence against women and girls. And last year we passed the landmark domestic abuse bill. I think the government has a fantastic track record. Now, there's more to do. I accept there is more to do, and the government is committed to doing that. But we're making great progress in the right direction, and I hope she will support us as we bring forward the draft victims bill in the near future.
Scott Benton.
Mr. Speaker, many residents of Blackpool are struggling to access an NHS dentist appointment. This is creating considerable problems for thousands of my constituents who can't afford to access early preventative treatments. It's also putting at risk the government's levelling up agenda by undermining health inequalities for the most disadvantaged of communities. Will the Leader of the House look to hold a debate in government time on how we can best support additional NHS dentistry provision?
I thank the honourable friend for his question, and of course I think it is something which is worthy of debate. That's why the government is putting in millions of pounds of investment into our NHS, which of course dentistry is a very important part of, and I'm sure as a local champion he will continue to pursue the health department to make sure his constituents get the services that they deserve.
Mr. Speaker, would the Leader of the House agree with me that every one of our constituents deserve the inalienable right to breathe clean air? And on National Clean Air Day, is he concerned that all the people who work in this Parliament were breathing in poisonous air yesterday? The measurements around Westminster were so bad, there was such a high level of nitrous oxide in the atmosphere, it was deeply poisonous. And, Mr. Speaker, can I remind the Leader of the House that when you come inside this building, that air follows you in, and levels of contamination of air are as bad in here as out next to a diesel bus outside. Could we have an early debate on how we tackle clean air for everyone in our country?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I join him in recognising Clean Air Day today. It is an important issue which the government takes seriously. That's why we're investing in infrastructure to try and improve the quality of our vehicles, to move towards electric vehicles. There's the Environment Bill, which we've recently passed, which is why we're also looking at investment in our energy production infrastructure to move to more renewable sources. But of course, we need to proceed at a pace that our constituents and consumers can afford. But that infrastructure is coming, and it's coming very quickly.
Yesterday I took part in a discussion on BBC Radio Humberside which included Councillor Steve Besant, the Mayor of North East Lincolnshire. The Mayor's wife suffered a delay of 10 hours after Councillor Besant called for an ambulance. Now I know that there are procedures to be followed, but on a previous occasion when I've been out with the ambulance crews, there does seem to be unnecessarily delays at the hospital and the changeover times. I know that procedures have to be followed, but could we have a debate or a statement from Health Minister so that we can debate this and see what we can actually do to improve the situation?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. I hope the councillor's wife is okay. He didn't indicate whether, and it's good to, he indicates that she is. So I think that clearly we are committed to investing huge amounts of cash within the NHS, but money is not always the answer. That's why the Health Secretary is determined to reform our great health services to make sure that they're more efficient and look at the practices that take place to make sure our constituents up and down the country get the service from the NHS they deserve.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This week I've heard that another 3 NHS dentists are handing back their NHS work and will be going private in the city of York. We hardly have any NHS dentists now in the city, and people are not only travelling miles but they're waiting years to see a dentist. This is completely unacceptable, and the pace government who are addressing this is also unacceptable. So can we have an urgent statement on NHS dentistry, because our constituents can't wait and our oral health of our nation is in deep decline?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question. It was health questions this week. I don't know if she had a chance to be in her place to ask the Health Secretary directly. But that is exactly why we're investing these huge amounts in our NHS to make sure we deal with the challenges within the NHS. She chose not to support that investment. It's a huge investment that we're putting in, along with the reforms that are coming forward. And I hope she'll be in her place to support the government as we move forward and continue with those reforms and investment.
Jacob Young.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can we have a debate on diagnosis and support for children with autism and Asperger's at an early age? Currently, the pathway for diagnosis is difficult for parents and often takes a couple of years, which means many young people aren't getting the support they need in nursery, in school and at home as well.
Well, I pay tribute to my honourable friend for the work that he does in this area and his tenacious attitude to pursuing this campaign. We did have health questions this week on Tuesday, but I will make sure I pass on his concerns directly to the Health Secretary, and I'm sure he will continue to be in his place to press the issue as enthusiastically as he does.
Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the 26th of May, I asked the Leader of the House for a debate on the role of traffic commissioners, given that bus companies are cancelling and changing bus routes without proper notice and consultation. The Leader's rather glib reply was that I should speak to my Labour colleagues in Wales as transport is devolved. Mr Speaker, I'm fully aware that transport is devolved, and in fact my Labour colleagues in the Senate have already published the buses bill to try to correct the mess created by a previous Tory government. But, Mr Speaker, the role of the traffic commissioners is not devolved. So can I ask again for the Leader to give a debate on the role of traffic commissioners, because the issue of buses being cancelled without notice is something that's affecting constituencies right across the country.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I'm grateful that he acknowledges that transport is devolved, is a devolved issue. I think we were also told yesterday, of course, that there are no rail strikes in Wales because of the brilliance of the Welsh Government. Well, that turns out not to be true either. I think these things are worthy of debate. I would encourage him to apply for a debate, because I know that the Secretary of State for Transport will engage enthusiastically in that debate and make sure that the record of the government is put very firmly.
Mr Speaker, the rising cost of energy bills in the UK has underlined the importance of the security of energy supply. Rolls-Royce have developed a state-of-the-art modular nuclear reactor. Each reactor could power a city the size of Leeds. Once up and running, we could produce one every 6 months. BEIS is financially supporting this, but the plans are stuck in the Treasury. So could we have a statement by the Treasury giving the green light to this important project so we can improve our energy resilience?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. 28th of June, I think, is Treasury questions, and I know he'll be in his place to ask the Chancellor of the Exchequer directly. He does recognise that we need to have a diverse energy supply system, and I think we're just catching up due to the lack of investment of previous governments in nuclear power. It's something that we can put right, and with great technology like Rolls-Royce supply, I think there's a bright future for the country's energy supply.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Speaker. This week marks Scottish Breastfeeding Week. So would the Minister, would the Leader of the House like to congratulate everybody involved in supporting breastfeeding right around Scotland and more widely? And would he bring forward debate in government time to debate the merits of bringing the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes into legislation so that those breastfeeding and those bottle feeding can be protected properly?
Well, I'm delighted to join the Honourable Lady in supporting Scottish Breastfeeding Week. I don't know why it's just Scottish Breastfeeding Week and we don't make it across the whole country. I think it's something which needs to be supported and advertised so that young mums can engage and make sure their children have their brightest future and start life with health and support. And I'm sure the Health Secretary will have heard her comments, but if he hasn't, I'll make sure he hears them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Mayor of London is consulting on axing 18% of London's buses. That's right, 18%. It really affects very badly Kensington and Chelsea. He is proposing that 7 bus routes are completely axed and a further 7 will be severely affected. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the Mayor of London is failing Londoners, whether it be bus cuts, strikes on the tube, more taxes on drivers, and will he contemplate a debate on the subject?
Well, I thank the honourable friend for a question. I'm shocked to hear that they may cut 18% of buses within the. I think his predecessor, the previous Mayor of London, was an enthusiastic supporter of buses and making sure that the transport links within London work. That's because the Conservative Party recognises getting people to work is very important. That's why we support transport, to make sure people can get to and from work and the economy continue to boom.
Speaker, large numbers of people who had flights cancelled over the Whitsun holiday period haven't had compensation, and increasingly consumer experts fear that many who had to purchase extra flights and extra hotel nights and had other costs too won't get compensation. So could we have a debate in government time on what the legal loopholes are preventing such compensation and what might be done to prevent a repeat in future?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He's right to highlight this. I too have had constituents affected in this negative way. I will make sure the Transport Department are aware of his comments. I think trying to communicate what rights consumers have is the right thing to do, and I will encourage the Department of Transport to give that advice and make sure it's as widely available as possible so constituents like his and mine in those circumstances know their rights.
Owen Thompson.
Speaker, now on the 28th of March, the Backbench Business Committee agreed a debate in my name on the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme and War Pension, and the House agreed that we should have a public inquiry into the handling of this and the issues affecting thousands of our veterans. Now, I followed this up with a written question, and on the 25th of April was told that the Department had no intention of holding the public inquiry that this House agreed to. So can the Leader of the House provide time in government time where we can consider the government's failure to comply with a resolution of this House?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I will make sure that the relevant department is aware of his comments. I think, while I'm on my feet, I think it's also worth recognising the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War this week, and we all have huge pride in our armed services across this House, and I know cross-party and across this House we want to support our armed services. We may disagree on the way to do that, but we certainly share that support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A joy was unconfined recently in the Cardiff City Stadium in my constituency of Cardiff West and across Wales when our men's team qualified for the World Cup for the first time in my lifetime, Mr. Speaker. And great credits due to Rob Page, the manager, and to the Football Association of Wales for the great leadership they've shown and the way they've linked the football team to our culture. But at the same time, they've signed a deal with Viaplay, via UEFA, which would take Welsh language commentary off of free-to-air provision in the years to come. Wouldn't it be a shame if, having achieved such a wonderful achievement, sporting and cultural, if the Welsh language, the great jewel of our Welsh language, was to be taken off free-to-air television in future years in one of its most popular dispensations, namely through football?
Well, I join the honourable gentleman in congratulating Wales on their qualification. I hope they will succeed in the group and come at least second. I think clearly we are the party of we are the party of S4C, of course, which is a great Welsh language channel. But I should certainly make sure the Secretary for DCMS is aware of the matter he's raised and write to her directly on his behalf.
Indulge me, Mr. Speaker, by way of preamble, I wish to congratulate you on the acquisition of your new cat, Clem, who I had the very great pleasure of meeting this morning.
Oh, really?
The Tories in Scotland have fought every election since 2014 with the slogan, "Vote Tory to stop an independence referendum."
Yep. What happened?
Yet, since 2014, the SNP has clearly won every UK, Scottish Parliament and Council election. Now, I know that the Leader of the House and his party has repeatedly and resoundingly been rejected by the Scottish electorate, but they think they know better when it comes to what the Scottish people want in choosing their own future. But will the Leader of the House make a statement explaining, because I genuinely don't know the answer to this, can he explain why he and his government believe democratic choices matter unless you live in Scotland?
Well, I thank the honourable lady. I also believe that democratic results matter. And I think the result of the referendum was to remain within the UK. Now, I understand why the honourable lady wants to talk about this, because she doesn't want to concentrate on the terrible record of the Scottish government. And the more that they talk about independence, the more we see through their plan to just disguise their failing results in education, their inability to deliver for the people of Scotland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Clean Air Day, and air pollution is one of the biggest threats to our health, which causes around 64,000 premature deaths a year. And we know that this government has failed to take meaningful action to tackle air pollution. In my own constituency, the PM2.5 concentration level is more than 2 times higher than that of the WHO. Now, everybody deserves to breathe clean air, and it is beyond me as to why this government will not commit to international health targets on air quality levels and be ambitious. So can we have a statement on what action the government is going to take to tackle air quality?
Well, the honourable lady will have the opportunity at Deaf Questions next week if she chooses to ask the Secretary of State directly. But the Environment Bill was a huge step forward in improving our environment. There's a Transport Bill coming up. It's something that the government is committed to improving clean air. On Clean Air Day, I think it's worth recognising the progress we've made, although there's further to go.
All right. Speaker, on Saturday I will be joining constituents in Cambuslang at Summerfest, which we're all very excited to see return after a 2-year break. There will be stalls, entertainment and community champion awards to recognise the work of local residents. Will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating John and Liz Edgar, who organises this, and everyone involved in organising the Gala Day, and schedule a debate in government time, recognising the value of community-led events and the work that goes into them?
Well, I'm delighted to join her in congratulating John and Liz Edgar. I'm sorry I can't make Summerfest myself, but I was going to Renfest, Mr. Speaker, in the village of Rainworth in July, a similar event. And I know up and down the country there are community groups that lay on these events, that draw people together, give us opportunity to socialise and communicate and support each other.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like my honourable friends earlier, many of my constituents in the City of Durham are being left unable to register for an NHS dentist, while those who have registered are finding it really difficult to access one due to an exodus of dentists towards the private sector. One constituent has told me, I can't afford private treatment, so what can I do? And the British Dental Association has warned This is how NHS dentistry will die. Does the Leader of the House agree with me that it's simply unacceptable that people in Durham can't afford to access dental appointments? And can I echo the call for a debate on the availability and the inequity of NHS dentistry?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Honourable Lady for a question. I think I'm right in saying there is an NHS dentistry debate next week. So I hope the Honourable Lady will take the opportunity to engage in that debate. It's something that the government does understand the challenges that we face. That's why we're putting in huge volumes of cash to support our NHS, and I look forward to listening to that debate next week.
Right, that ends business questions. We now come to the statement. Can I call the Foreign Secretary, the Right Honourable Elizabeth Truss?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to update the House on our support for Ukraine. It's almost 4 months since Putin launched this illegal war, bringing untold suffering to the innocent people of Ukraine. The United Kingdom has stood at Ukraine's side throughout. We've led the charge in the G7, delivering 6 waves of unprecedented coordinated sanctions, causing a £256 billion hit to the Russian economy. The UK has pledged over £1 billion in economic and humanitarian support to Ukraine, making us the 3rd largest bilateral humanitarian donor. And we were the first European country to deliver military aid, from armoured vehicles to multiple launch rocket systems. This has spurred others to step up their support. This united effort has been vital to back Ukraine. But we are now approaching a critical moment. Russia is bombarding towns and cities in the east, and some outside Ukraine are questioning whether the free world can sustain its support, and claiming that some are beginning to tire of this war. Mr. Speaker, the people of Ukraine do not have that luxury. Our answer must be clear. We will never tire of defending freedom and democracy. Russian aggression cannot be appeased. It will be met with strength. We know what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. Evidence grows of heinous war crimes, the butchery of innocent Ukrainian civilians, rape, torture and abduction. We will ensure these crimes are fully investigated and that justice is done. Russian proxies are breaching the Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War, including the targeting of British citizens. I utterly condemn these actions, and we're working through the Ukrainian authorities to secure their release and hold Russia to account. I'm in close contact with my Ukrainian counterpart, Dmytro Kuleba. Allowing aggression to succeed would only bring further conflict and misery, and this war would not stop in Ukraine. So we are committed to stepping up our commitment, maintaining the pressure on Russia's economy, and entrenching our policy of containment and isolation of Russia. In the coming weeks, leaders will meet at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting and at the G7, G20 and NATO summits. These meetings are an opportunity to stand with Ukraine and to stand up for sovereignty and freedom. Ukraine can and must win this war. We will never backslide on our commitments, however long this conflict goes on. Our determination to defend our principles will outmatch those of the aggressors. And the result of Putin's aggression so far has been to unite the free world. We are stronger now than we were 4 months ago, and Russia is weaker. We must maintain this unity. We must be relentless in delivering military aid at this critical time. This includes long-range weapons and other vital needs, and improving the quality of Ukraine's military equipment to long-term to NATO standards. That's why my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, launched the UK-Poland Joint Commission in early April, and we're working with Ukraine and other allies to shape its future defence strategy and deter future aggression. We must also back Ukraine in any negotiations. So far, Russia has shown they're not serious about negotiations. We can never allow Ukraine to be pressurised into giving up territory in a way that we would never accept ourselves. Through the G7 and NATO, we are doing everything we can to strengthen Ukraine's hand. We need to also make sure that our Baltic friends and our Polish friends are involved. Sanctions must be kept in place while Russian boots are on Ukrainian soil, and we must keep increasing the pressure. Today, I have announced our latest sanctions package. This includes Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, who has repeatedly abused his position to justify the war. It includes Russia's Children's Rights Commissioner, who has orchestrated a policy that enables the forced transfer and adoption of Ukrainian children into Russia. And it includes 4 further collaborators in the breakaway republics for their collusion in this occupation. Whilst our immediate priority must be to help Ukraine win the war, we're also working to rebuild the country as fast as possible with a new Marshall Plan. At the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Lugano next month, we will rally the international reconstruction efforts, urging all of our partners to bring ambitious offers to the table. I'm working with Minister Kuleba on new investment into Kyiv and to help reconstruct those towns in the region that have been liberated from Russia's destructive occupation. Russia's efforts to destroy Ukraine will only lead to it becoming a stronger, more prosperous and more united European nation. We must also end Russia's attack on global food security. The Kremlin is blockading Ukrainian ports, shelling civilian infrastructure and preventing Ukraine from exporting its produce. By driving up food prices and creating shortages, they're punishing the world's poorest and most vulnerable. At the same time, they're peddling lies and disinformation, claiming the problems are because of sanctions. We are exposing these lies, and we're working with our partners to unlock the export of grain and open the commercial shipping routes. We will stand with our friends in the Commonwealth and beyond who are suffering. In the long run, there must be consequences for Russia's actions. For would-be aggressors everywhere, Putin must not only lose this war, he must also be denied any benefit from it. Any future aggression must be prevented, and Russia must be isolated on the world stage. Ukraine must prevail for the good of its people and to uphold the fundamental principles of sovereignty, self-determination, freedom and democracy. The UK stands with Ukraine for the long haul. I commend this statement to the House.
Yeah. We now come to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lamey.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful for advance copy of the Foreign Secretary's statement. Putin's war is now 112 days old. Ukraine continues to show remarkable defiance, but they are paying a dreadful cost for this war, and they need our support more than ever. We support the steps the government has taken, including the recent provision of multiple launch rocket systems in coordination with our American and German allies. Can the Minister confirm what additional steps the government is considering to provide Ukraine with NATO standard equipment and what efforts she's taking to urge other allies to do the same? And can she confirm the contracts that have been signed to replenish stockpiles in the UK? There are deeply troubling reports not just of the military assault, but the devastating consequences for civilians, including mass internment and the removals of tens of thousands of Ukrainians to Russia. What assessment has she made of these reports? The humanitarian situation in Ukraine remains grave. The latest estimates from the United Nations suggest that 10,000 innocent civilians have now lost their lives in this senseless war, with many hundreds of children included in that number. More than 15 million people in Ukraine are in dire need of urgent humanitarian assistance and protection. This includes millions who've been internally displaced and those who are unable to flee entrenched towns and cities. Given the scale of the crisis faced by the people of Ukraine and the hunger crisis Russia's war is driving across the world, how can the Minister justify the decision announced in the International Development Strategy to cut humanitarian aid budget by 35%? And can she tell us what proportion of the 220 million humanitarian pledge to Ukraine to date has been delivered on the ground? And will she provide a breakdown to the House of those allocations? One of the gravest consequences of this war has been the disruption of global food supplies. Russia's blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea ports, which harbour 98% of grain exports, is driving a humanitarian catastrophe. Global food prices have risen to 41%. We know at home the pressures that this is causing across the world. In East Africa, which is already suffering severe drought, this could lead to famine. The International Rescue Committee predicts that 47 million people will face acute hunger this year. Putin must not be allowed to use hunger as a weapon of war. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary what more can be done to facilitate the export of grain via the Black Sea or alternative land routes? Will the Foreign Secretary support my call for an emergency global food summit to address this grave crisis, which is exacerbating humanitarian crisis around the world? There's shocking evidence also that Russia is mining agricultural areas. What more can be done to support those trying to stop it? And what diplomatic steps is she taking, including at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting next week, to sustain and grow the international opposition to this war across the world? Mr. Speaker, Labour's commitment to the security of our NATO allies is unshakable. At the end of June, NATO leaders will gather in Madrid. The summit is an important moment for the alliance to build and sustain unity and support for Ukraine. And it's a moment to hopefully welcome new allies in Finland and Sweden, whose application we fully support. It's concerning that Turkey has said it's willing to delay their entry by up to a year. What discussions has the Foreign Secretary had with counterparts in Turkey about the paramount need to avoid delays and sustain unity? Mr. Speaker, last week, 2 Britons, Aidan Aslan and Sean Pinner, who were serving in the Ukrainian military, were prosecuted in an illegitimate court despite being legitimate prisoners of war. This breach of the international rule of law, of armed conflict, is shameful. The FCDO must urgently support the families of these soldiers who will be in deep distress at this time. The Foreign Secretary promised to do whatever it takes to secure their release. Can she update the House on what progress the FCDO has made in this vital task? And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask about Alex Navalny. There are now troubling reports that he has been transferred from the IK2 penal colony without the knowledge of either his family or his lawyer, and his whereabouts are now unknown. Mr. Navalny, alongside others like Vladimir Kara-Murza, has been a towering voice of defiance against the corruption of Putin's regime. Will the Foreign Secretary join me in sending a clear message that his treatment is unacceptable, that the world is watching, and that his voice will not be silenced? Mr. Speaker, since the start of Putin's illegal war, all sides of this House have utterly condemned Russia's attack and offered our full solidarity to the people of Ukraine in their struggle for freedom and democracy. It is vital that as this conflict rages on, we continue to support President Zelensky and Ukraine's courageous people in their fight and as they face this barbarism.
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his strong support for the actions we are taking to support Ukraine and to condemn Russia for this appalling illegal war. We continue to be in talks with the Ukrainians about what more we can do. We're now supplying, as I mentioned, multiple launch rocket systems. But what is important is they do get up to that NATO standard equipment. That's why we have the Joint Commission with Poland and Ukraine to develop those plans, and we'll be saying more on that at the NATO summit. He's also right about the appalling forced transfer of people to Russia, including children, and that's why in today's sanctions we're specifically targeting those who are enabling that appalling practice. And of course, he is right too about global food prices and the appalling way that Russia is weaponizing hunger to pursue their ends in Ukraine. We are working with our G7 allies on helping get the grain out of Ukraine. We are also in talks with the UN, and we are doing all we can to facilitate Finland and Sweden's urgent accession to NATO. What Putin wanted was less NATO, but what he is getting is more NATO, as people understand that the Euro-Atlantic alliance is vital to securing security across Europe. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the point about the British citizens, we are in regular talks with the Ukrainian government. These people are prisoners of war. They were fighting legitimately with the Ukrainian army, and what Russia has done is a complete violation of the Geneva Convention, and we are taking all steps we can. And finally, I just want to say on the subject of the future of Russia, it is clear that we can never allow Russia to be in a position to undertake this aggression again, and that is also to do with internal repression as well as it is to do with their external aggression, and that is why we wholeheartedly support Navalny, and we are very, very concerned about the reports we have heard, and we urge Russia to release him as soon as possible.
Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Elwood.
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. The rising price of food in this country and indeed across Europe and beyond reminds us why Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. But as she's been articulating, that port of Odessa is closed. It is ground zero when it comes to exporting grain. Could I ask her to use our P5 status at the United Nations to go directly to the General Assembly, bypassing the UN Security Council, to look at securing a UN General Assembly resolution to grant the port of Odessa an international safe haven status as a starting point to get that port reopened? We've shown leadership in Ukraine. Let's show leadership in Odessa now.
Well, my right honourable friend is right to highlight the very, very serious issues in Odessa. What we are doing is working with the Ukrainians on shore-to-ship weapons to help protect the port. We are working with the UN, both through the General Assembly and through other mechanisms to try and secure access to the port. But it's also important to look at the coalitions of the willing that could actually take action. And of course, the G7 is important in that. That's why I'm having a video call with my G7 foreign minister counterparts, as well as the very important role Turkey plays. And we are also in talks with the Turks. We are doing all we can to get that grain out of Ukraine, because it is vital for the Ukrainian economy, but also to deal with the very real issue of world hunger.
SNP spokesperson Owen Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also thank the Secretary of State for the advance sight of the statement. And on these benches, we continue to stand in support of the actions of the government and in absolute solidarity with the people of Ukraine. The fallout of this crisis has impacted on other regions, alarmingly so, and in the Middle East alone, Lebanon's wheat flour prices are already up 47%. Yemen's cooking oil prices up 36%, and Syria's cooking oil prices up 39%. Chris Elliott from the Institute of Global Food Security at Queen's University Belfast said there are likely to be famines in Africa because of what's happening in Ukraine. And David Beasley of the UN World Food Programme's Executive Director, who's told the world to get ready for hell. The Foreign Office International Development Strategy, published just last month, locked in aid cuts from this government imposed on countries like Syria for years to come. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary what steps she's going to take to reconsider these decisions? Madam Deputy Speaker, US President Biden has signed off on a plan to help export 25 million tonnes of grain that's stuck in Ukraine by rail because of the Russian naval blockade, the plan to build silos in Poland. So could I ask the Foreign Secretary what discussions she's had with American and Polish allies to offer support in the construction and logistical delivery of this plan? And Madam Deputy Speaker, obviously the actions of many in spreading misinformation is having a significant impact, and I would ask the Foreign Secretary what action she's taking to clamp down further on bots and cyber troops who perpetuate such misinformation. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, members on these benches are supportive of the government's sanctions regime against the Kremlin, and it is essential as a component of our response to Putin's heinous crimes and the invasion in Ukraine. And with that in mind, I would draw the Secretary of State's attention to the effects of sanctions on the non-government controlled areas. Sanctions prohibit transfer of certain goods and technical equipment, including water pumps and refrigeration equipment. So can I ask what steps she's taking to ensure that humanitarian organisations can better get this equipment into these non-government controlled areas?
The honourable gentleman is right to point out the major issues we face with world hunger as a result of Russian actions, and this is why the UK and our partners have stepped up with the largest ever World Bank financial commitment to developing countries to support them being faced with this economic hardship as a result of this appalling war in Ukraine. We, in our aid strategy and aid budget, have moved funding into humanitarian aid and are one of the leading funders into Ukraine, but we are also annually increasing our budget into Africa as well to support those countries at this very difficult time. And I am in regular contact with the United States Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, talking precisely about how we can provide that direct support to Ukraine, both in terms of humanitarian aid, but also in terms of military support too.
Andrew Merson.
The geopolitical consequences of hungry people in poor countries is not lost on our NATO ally Turkey, which is preparing plans to escort merchant vessels out of Ukrainian ports using their resources. What assistance can we give the Turks in that respect, and particularly given our long and very distinguished history of mine clearance on land and at sea, what naval assets can we offer in order to be of assistance to them in their plan, and will we continue to assist efforts to ship grain overland to Baltic ports and to ports in Poland, and to extract grain through that route also?
Well, I can assure my honourable friend that we are in talks with Turkey and with our G7 allies about all the assistance we can give and all of the UK resources that we can deploy, both for the sea route and, as the honourable gentleman mentions as well, the rail routes too. And there is more we can do to increase the capacity on those rail routes to get grain out faster, but ultimately to get the full harvest out, we do need to use the sea routes as well, and that is why we're in talks with the Turks, but also with our G7 allies.
Wayne David.
Can I welcome much of the statement which has been made this morning by the Foreign Secretary, but can I press her a little bit with regard to the application for Sweden and Finland to join NATO? Because it's simply not on for Turkey to threaten to delay the application for a year, and will she make forceful representations to Turkey to make it clear to them that what they are proposing is simply not on?
At the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting, I did raise my concerns directly with the Turkish Foreign Minister. I'm due to be in touch with him again next week. The Prime Minister has also spoken to President Erdogan as well. We are very clear that it is vital that Sweden and Finland join NATO. It will help strengthen the alliance, and that the Turkish government need to agree to make that happen.
Faye Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the forced transfer and adoption of Ukrainian children is simply unspeakably cruel, and so I warmly welcome the Foreign Secretary's announcement of further sanctions this morning. When this is over and Putin has failed, will she confirm that the UK government will continue the leadership role it's played in diplomatic and humanitarian efforts to reunite these families?
It is simply unspeakable that the Russian Children's Rights Commissioner has been orchestrating this appalling policy of the forced transfer and adoption of Ukrainian children into Russia. And we are very clear that we are doing all we can to stop that taking place. We're doing all we can to support Ukraine. But when this war is over, when Ukraine has won this war, of course, we will continue to support the country, we'll continue to support their families in helping the country recover and those families to be reunited.
Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The Response Rescue International, a charity that trains dogs to recover human remains following natural or man-made disasters, wants to provide services to the people of Ukraine. Since the UK left the EU, the charity is required to pay £75 per dog to be seen by a vet every time the dogs are called to another country to find human remains. The service could be seen as an emergency service, and given that they are going to travel to Ukraine, could the Secretary of State work with other departments to see whether these charges could be waived?
Well, we have already made sure that we are providing funding to the Halo Trust for demining in Ukraine. And of course, through the budget, we have allocated the 220 million humanitarian aid. Of course, we will look at the best possible use of the money, and I would strongly encourage the charity she mentions to apply directly to the Foreign Office, and we'll look at that proposal.
Andrew Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I welcome our right honourable friend's statement and commend the government for the strength of its response to support the Ukrainian people and the struggle they have against this Russian aggression. Can she confirm that we are going to redouble our efforts to support them with humanitarian aid, medical aid and food as the people of Ukraine are suffering horribly?
Well, I can confirm that, and we have already dispatched a significant amount of our £220 million budget. We are doing further allocations to make sure that there is a continued supply of food into Ukraine and there is a continued supply of medical equipment. And we're also seeing organisations like the National Health Service donating equipment directly, as well as the British public very heavily involved too.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The brave men and women fighting in Ukraine have been granted a very short period of leave for respite and to refresh before going back to fight again. If their families are placed in Europe, there are no restrictions on their travel, but if their families have now come to the UK, there are. So will the Foreign Secretary work with the Home Office to ensure that there are no barriers for people to come to the UK over that short period so that they can spend maximum time with their families?
I'm certainly very happy to raise that issue with the Home Secretary.
Raymond Christie.
Deputy Speaker, I very much welcome the statement by the Foreign Secretary. The United Kingdom has led the world in supporting the people of Ukraine through military, diplomatic and economic means, and therefore the world looks to the United Kingdom with regards to the next steps. Can I ask the Foreign Secretary this? She said the United Kingdom is working with G7 partners to support our Ukrainian friends in the negotiations. With that being the case, has the Foreign Secretary seen anything at the moment from any counterpart with regards to a constructive proposal with regards to an effective endgame and next steps? Because that is absolutely crucial that we achieve that.
We have established within the Foreign Office a negotiation cell which is working with our partners in the Quad to make sure that the Ukraine gets the best possible support in any negotiations. At present, the Russians simply aren't serious about negotiations, and I suspect that it is only when Russia is pushed back and pushed out of Ukraine that they will become serious about negotiations. But we are very clear that we cannot have a repeat of Minsk, where we saw Ukrainian territory carved up and we saw an unfair peace settlement. So what we are very clear about is we're supporting the Ukrainians to maintain their territorial integrity. We not only need to deal with the future of Ukraine, we also need to make sure any future settlement contains future Russian aggression. That's the position we're taking. We're working very closely with our allies to make that happen.
Alison Toulis.
Deputy Speaker, I attended a very chilling meeting yesterday with Ukrainian MPs, Air Wars, the Halo Trust, who the Secretary of State mentioned, and the Mines Advisory Group, who all highlighted the challenges of the dangerous mines that Russia have left behind. Their impression was that it will take years to remove these mines before rebuilding can even begin, and I welcome what the Secretary of State has said about rebuilding. Can she tell me what that wider programme is of demining all of these areas so that so that rebuilding can start, because not a single brick can be laid in the ground until we can be assured that it is safe to do so.
Well, we're working very closely with the Halo Trust and also the Ukrainian government on demining in those areas, and also a number of our international counterparts also have demining vessels to operate in the sea, as well as land-based support. But she is absolutely right, this will take years to get right, but our approach has been to fund the Halo Trust to get on with this work so we can clear those mines as soon as possible, so that life can get back to what it should be in Ukraine.
Stan Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome this statement. There have been 6 waves of unprecedented coordinated sanctions. Can my right honourable friend confirm the impact so far on the Russian economy as a result of these sanctions?
Well, I can confirm there has been £256 billion worth of impact on the Russian economy, and what we have also seen is the economy push back roughly 15 years in terms of the availability of goods and services in Russia, and that's important for sending a message to Russia and the people of Russia that the actions of their government in supporting this appalling war are simply unacceptable.
Margaret Ferrier.
Speaker, and I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement. Her colleague, the Defence Secretary, has said China is watching, and that makes the outcome in Ukraine even more important. What engagement has the Foreign Secretary had with counterparts in Taiwan, who will be feeling very anxious as the war in Ukraine continues?
Well, the Honourable Lady is correct, and I have spoken to my Chinese counterpart and made it clear how unacceptable any Chinese support for Russia would be in this conflict. I'm very concerned about the recent statement that we've seen from President Xi on that subject. And of course, we continue to trade with Taiwan, we continue to support Taiwan and defend internationally the principle of sovereignty, self-determination and freedom, which should govern the international order.
Richard Fuller.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sean Pinner, a British citizen and a member of the Ukrainian Armed Forces for many years, was captured while injured by Russian proxy forces. Since when he has been coerced into making calls to his family to seek a trade for his life. He has been put through a show trial with no independent legal support, and he has been given an arbitrary and unjustified death sentence. All of this without any access from the Red Cross. Sean Pinner is a prisoner of war, and many of these actions, sanctioned by Russia, are against the Geneva Convention. Will my right honourable friend redouble her efforts to work with Russia to secure Red Cross access to Sean and to other British citizens held by Russian proxies in Ukraine?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this on behalf of Sean Pinner and the other British citizens who are being wrongly detained. They are prisoners of war. They were fighting legitimately for the Ukrainian army. These actions by Russian proxies are completely abhorrent, and we are working very, very closely with the Ukrainian authorities to seek the urgent release of these people.
Mr. Buchan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I had the pleasure at the weekend of visiting the Ukrainian school in my constituency. They have seen a massive surge in numbers, from 250 students to approximately 900. They are also employing refugees who are teachers in Ukraine but now living in London, so that Ukrainian pupils can continue their Ukrainian lessons and get their qualifications. Will my right honourable friend talk to her counterpart in the Department of Education to see if there is any support, financial or otherwise, that we can give to the Ukrainian school?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question, and the Ukrainian community in the UK has been a vital part of our response, and I was pleased to visit the Ukrainian club in Bolton. I know there are many clubs and schools and other institutions around the country, and I will certainly talk to my colleagues in the Department of Education about potentially visiting the school and seeing what more we can do. And I'm pleased to say that 95,000 people have now been granted visas to come to the United Kingdom, and they are contributing to life in the UK, and of course to our aim to support Ukraine in this appalling war.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement and everything she and the whole government is doing to support our friends in Ukraine. If I may return to the issue of getting the grain out of Ukraine. The commitments that my right honourable friend made are very welcome, but what further reassurance can she give the House that the talks that she is having, the plans that are being put together, are aware of the severe time sensitivity, with grain stores full now, harvest nearly upon us, that if we don't solve this within weeks, it is a problem that will go on for years?
We are very, very aware of the critical time frame that we're operating in, and this is why, alongside the talks with the UN, we're also talking to G7 allies, we're also talking to NATO allies like Turkey to get this done as soon as we can.
Final question, Jacob Young.
Deputy Speaker, and can I commend the Foreign Secretary and the Opposition front bench for their resolute support of Ukraine expressed again today. How is she working with our international allies, both inside and outside of NATO, to ensure that their support is unwavering as well?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he is right that the Ukrainian people have support of all sides of this House and of all of the people of the United Kingdom. And I think it's very significant when you look at opinion surveys of the level of support for Ukraine. The United Kingdom is always near the top of the list, alongside Poland and our friends in the United States. And you can see it by the flags flying, the Ukrainian flags in towns and villages right across the United Kingdom. And I think that encouragement, the steps that we are taking by providing the weapons, by putting on more sanctions, we put more sanctions on today, helps encourage others that this war can be won. What we need to make sure is that the Ukrainian people continue to have hope, that there will be a better future, and the way they get that is through the strong support of the international community. And I'm proud that the United Kingdom has led on the supply of weapons, we've led on sanctions, and we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to work with our allies to move forward.
Well, I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement, and we now come to the statement from Minister Eddie Hughes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, our homes, whether we own them or not, are where we go to sleep, where we wake up every day, and where we raise our children, care for our elderly. They ought to be places of safety and security. For many of the 11 million private renters in this country, that most reasonable expectation does not match up to reality. And as I speak to you today, conditions in our private rented sector are simply not good enough. There are countless tenants living in constant fear of eviction, tenants who do not feel able to demand repairs to mould and damp in their homes, and tenants whose health suffers because of the combination of stress and unacceptable conditions. Simply not good enough. And it's not just tenants who the system isn't working for, it's landlords too. While our determination to turn generation rent into generation buy is an unwavering one, and the Prime Minister's commitment last weekend to extend right to buy will build on that record, we need to help the many people for whom home ownership is out of reach right now. And faced with the escalating cost of living, rent rises and house prices high enough to give the average prospective buyer